Okay, welcome back to Dear Creator. I am Danny Daniela. The Dear Creator experience is about pausing. We are considering our belief systems and where they come from, posing quality questions, but most importantly, we are placing that mirror in front of ourselves to identify who are you? How do we respond to this content that we consume? What do we want to do with it? How do we feed through and sift through all of the different insights and thoughts that we consume through the internet? And I recently did a review of my response, just my story of getting to the Sinners movie, watching the Sinners movie, and just my perspective as it relates to the spiritual lenses. But every time I create content, I went on a walk, I came back, I'm on Instagram, and I came across some content that made me think even further. And so I'm going to go through two pieces of content today. One is from a creator from Awakening and Becoming. Her name is Nusilla. I've had the pleasure of speaking to her in the past on my podcast, Earth Experiences. I'll put that link in the description below. But I reached out to her because she brings another perspective, and I'm always open to having conversations to learn what it is I don't know. A lot of today's experience is going to be me starting that process because there's a lot that I don't know beyond my upbringing in Christianity. So although I was brought up in Christianity, I do still form my quality questions. I also have my personal relationship with God, but I've been exposed to other perspectives. I've also been exposed to the other world of Christianity, that there are different views and different doctrines and different groups within the group itself. So I'm going to get us to a T-chart where we look at both sides, and then I have a question I want to pose to you all. But before we get into it, I want to look at Nusilla's reaction.
If as a black person you watch the movie Sinners and you jump to the conclusion that the movie is demonic, or you thought Pastor Boy Sammy should have listened to his father and used his talent to worship the Christian God, I want to let you know that you're not smart. You are exactly what's wrong with us. You are the virus within us. The whole point of the movie was to show you that the church is a tool used to suppress your power, your true natural connection to spirit. See, the church teaches you to play small, to stay safe, to follow rules meant to contain. But black people, you are born with natural connection to spirit that runs deeper than any doctrine, older than any book ever written. I need you to understand that Sammy's guitar wasn't just an instrument. It wasn't just his art. It was a bridge to something greater. It was a portal to liberation. Sammy's strings didn't just make music. They echoed to the ancestors. They cracked open the truth. And truth is always scary, especially if you're told it's dangerous. You've been taught that African spirituality is dangerous, it's barbaric, it's demonic, and that's why you fear your own power, even when it's shown right in front of your face. You still fear it, you still run away from it, and you still find a way to defend these Western religions. But if as a black person, when you watch that movie, you were not inspired to look into your history, to look back into yourself and find your roots, I don't know what to tell you, because you cannot be saved anymore. You are the weakest link, and hey, we don't know what to do with you anymore. But anyway, that's it. That's all. Amazing film. If you haven't watched it, I recommend it. And if you have watched it, watch it again, because there is so much to dissect.
I think she's so funny. I think she's so funny, especially because her intros are like, you are not smart. And I like her delivery because it feels like it's authentic. It's coming from her. It also gives me an opportunity to position some questions about what I'm consuming. Just like I would in the church, I do the same with all of the other different doctrines and ideologies out here. What I've noticed is there's usually a split. The split looks like if you're on the Christian side, and this is for example, because I know there's more than Christianity in life, but if you're on the Christian side, it's like everything outside of this has to be wrong in these different ways, and everything that we say on this side is true. Same side. Now let's transition to the other side where maybe people are not practicing Christianity. They're practicing an African spirituality or Pan-Africanism, or they're practicing something of the sort. I'm saying something of the sort because I do not know all. I've always looked in this lens of Christianity and all the other things. I'm aware of that, but I am starting this conversation to see what is it that I don't know and what is it that I'm interested in understanding. Doesn't mean I want to pick everything, but I do find this type of content worthy of conversation. So on the left-hand side of everything that we just listened to, I want to pull out some questions, something for us to consider. I'm not going to say anything new on this channel, just different ways of saying the same thing. Is we are being mindful of the content that we consume, but we are putting that mirror in front of us. And that mirror sometimes is these questions, identifying the type of systems that we engage in, what systems are helpful for us and which are harmful. This is why I'm also an ambassador for Garden, because Garden perfectly mirrors what it is that I want to share with my brand, is that there are some tools and some systems that help us with transitioning, especially if we can't get down in the dirt and do it from the root and know all of the things. There are some systems in place that help us because of the environment that we're currently in. So just as we consider what content we allow in, Garden invites a reconsidering of what enters the home, the kitchen, and the body. It's all connected. Garden is a system that uses real-time sensors, LED lighting, and automatic watering to grow over 30 plants at once. No soil, no outdoor space needed. That means fresh herbs, greens, fruits, and vegetables are always within reach, grown without pesticides or plastic packaging. It's a quiet shift towards nourishment that matches an intentional life. For anyone ready to make that shift, you can use the QR code on the screen and you can get $100 off your system. So back to our T-chart. So now we have Nusilla. She's going to be on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, I want to have us consider some questions. Now, when it comes to the Sinners movie, one thing that stood out to me, there was a line, there's a moment in time where we identify that there is a practice. I don't know the practice. There's a practice that leans to African spirituality. It leans to something outside of Christianity. We also see that there's a church. This church scene actually reminds me of a movie called The Color Purple, when the daughter is coming back to her father. That resonated with me because I love The Color Purple. I like The Color Purple. But even in that movie, we start to learn that there are topics that the Black culture might not talk about in detail. And so this is the art. This is why art is so beautiful, because it gives us an opportunity to talk about it. So boom, boom, bam, I'm talking about it. We have the church in the movie. We have people in white. It's symbolizing like maybe this is the answer. We have the preacher boy who's representing maybe this is the answer. So I like what Nusilla is doing here. She's sharing a different perspective about the preacher boy, because that's what we always see. We want to see it pull through, that the good side, the God side, the Christ side is winning. We also noticed that there was an invitation to explore spirituality, and there are people who are starting to explore this more because of the movie. I don't put this in a bad container or a good container. I just put it somewhere. I don't know where to put it actually, but I don't know what to do with it, because I know for sure that we're influenced, and I know that I can be influenced, and there are small ways that we're influenced, and we don't know that we're being influenced at that time. But I do give an opportunity to pause and think, and this is what we're going to do today. So when I'm thinking about the spirituality that's brought out in the movie, there's a line that stands out to me, and I might not get it perfectly, but the question was about why the practices didn't save the baby. Like, why didn't it save the baby if the practices were saving me, and you're saying that it saved me, or has been helping me, or it's been protecting me? Why didn't it protect something that we would care about? The death of someone that we love. This is a question that we also get in religion, or our relationship with God, is why does the world work this way? Why is this happening? Really valid questions as we try to figure out this life and what comes from it. We're trying to figure out what is the best belief system. And so the first two questions I have when it comes to just having this conversation is, when we have a belief system and we grow up in a belief system, how do we know what's taught to us is absolute truth, or is an interpretation that has been diluted in any way? When I think about stories about spirituality, I think about people practicing spirituality or practicing anything that I didn't grow up in. I'm pausing and I'm considering everything that I've learned from childhood. How do I know that it's absolute? The only thing that worked for me was an actual personal relationship, and being able to connect with God through the word, through experiences that I know was exposed to me because of the relationship I was creating. I couldn't lean that to anything else. And I knew that when I used certain language and I've scanned my life, that a lot of that had to do with my belief system. I'm not really interested in digging away from that. I'm more interested in investigating where there's loopholes or where I don't understand to see where those other lies are, even though it's mixed up underneath a blanket called Christianity. So I'm focused and leaning more towards the relationship. Now, on the other side, I see there's something about this other world that I'm not that interested in. But did I get that interest because someone taught me that it was bad or it was ooey? I think that is a good question. It's something that I don't shy away from, but I do want to figure out, hey, maybe I want to learn how strong is my faith? Not so that I can prove it to other people, but just so I can understand what it is that I actually believe in. You get to a point where you don't really need to prove it to yourself. And so sometimes we use our faith systems to prove it to ourselves by trying to prove it to other people. What does that look like? So let's say a person is a Christian. We'll put a stick person up on the screen. This person is into religion. They grew up in a religion. They go to college. Someone in college tells them, your Christ is a white man. The white man is the devil. And then that person pauses and says, what? That's not who I serve. Then that person starts to go at them and presents all these other questions. Well, what about this? And why does this happen in the world? And that religion is making you docile. And so now that person is starting to keep on to that faith, hold on to what they always known, but then they feel a little weakened. And so they try to strengthen themselves by saying, this is what's wrong with your faith. Or this person can turn into another place where it's like, you know what? You're right. I'm considering these things. Or it could be someone who's like, I have a relationship with my faith. I have a relationship with my God. And there's nothing that you can really do to take me away. And then there's a person who has that same idea, but they're really zealous to the point where they're mad at everyone who's against their belief system. Now, I'm not putting anyone in a bad container or a good container. I just want us to consider all these different spaces are just a few aspects and nuances of how people consider beliefs, but there's always something that can be extended. When it comes to looking at, hey, someone is into something I don't believe in, what is your goal with your belief system? So that's my next question. Whenever we believe in something and we know that our belief is the truth, what is our goal with that truth? Is our goal to prove everyone else wrong? Is our goal to live out our truth? In some cases with Christianity, you're supposed to spread the good news. So there is a practice where you have to start talking to people. This is what I encourage in my own life, and this is what's helped me, is when people actually just live out their fruit. They live out the truth. And they don't have to convince anyone. They don't have to even belittle anyone. They don't have to make fun of anyone. Their truth is just so true that it's evident. But how do you communicate that? To me, I'm on YouTube. In some way, this might be me trying to convince anyone, but I've packaged this as a self-awareness journey. I'm going through a journey. There's no right or wrong. I want you to mirror yourself. I want you to consider these questions. Here's a starter. Here's a question that I have. But ultimately, I want you to think about these things. Now, when I pause, I'm always listening to how people communicate. And if they're communicating and it's mostly about their personal experience and their stories, I find it credible because you can't take away that story. Do people lie? Yes. But can you, in some cases, feel something from a story? Absolutely. In some cases, I don't feel something. In some cases, I do. It doesn't make whatever truth they shared with me absolutely true, but I do respond to it in a way. If that was a lie and it inspired me to be better in one way or the other, I'm going to take it for what it is, making anything that comes in this world something better. Where I find a problem is when people are trying to make everyone else wrong, when we don't really, okay. I want to say this because it's true to me right now. My lens might be limited. But who has the absolute truth when it comes to this faith and religion conversation? And how do you know? Most of it is coming from our personal, maybe spiritual experiences, and then we're defining. And so that's what we hold on to. Some of us are just mad and angry and we just want to be right. We don't really have any relationship to what we are trying to preach. We just got mad at one case, and so we went to the other case. But I can stop there because there's so many different other scenarios, right? When there are so many different other scenarios, it's easier to go back and reflect on self. So here's what I'll do from here. I'm going to pause and I'm going to go and reflect on some of the other areas here in Nusilla's content that allows for us to answer another question or consider another question that we might not have the answer to. So let's go back and scan some of the things that Nusilla says that stands out to me. I'll position a question to you all, and you let me know in the chat or in the comment box below. What are your takes on some of the content? What are your questions? Okay, so let's go through some of these quotes. I'm going to have them reiterated through the video, and then I'm going to put some questions on the left-hand side. As we go through these, I know that I have a lot of questions, so consider that you're just going to pick the questions that matter to you, that stand out to you, that you want to answer in your journal to do a deeper reflection. So let's look at this first one. This is one that stands out to me because Nusilla has a trend of like calling people names, and I'm one of the people that like, how do you have to call people names in order to get your point across? But because she does it so well, I end up laughing. So I don't have like a sting with it. But let's look at this quote first, and I have some questions for you. So she says,
if as a Black person you watch the movie Sinners and you jump to the conclusion that the movie is demonic, or you thought Pastor Boy Sammy should have listened to his father and used his talent to worship the Christian God, I want to let you know that you're not smart.
So here we are. The questions to consider. When you say that someone is not smart, is it that people aren't smart, or is it that people just come from different experiences? They have different lenses on how to look at certain things. And some of that is from their upbringing. So maybe when they were coming through their faith journey, there was a very powerful understanding that all these other things were demonic. So I leave space and room to consider that there are people who just know what they know. And to make it that they are intelligent because you came across this knowledge just seems unfair. But y'all let me know in the comments, do we have to call people names in order to get our point across? So here's some other questions to consider. What influences how people interpret spiritual messages in film or art? How do cultural background and religious upbringing shape what you see as sacred or dangerous? When someone expresses faith differently, what makes us affirm or reject it? And how do we decide which expressions of worship are valid? Now let's look at this next quote.
The whole point of the movie was to show you that the church is a tool used to suppress your power, your true natural connection to spirit.
When I had my interview with Nusilla, I had this question about how she says these definitive statements as if she knows them to be true. And she mentioned that it was a part of her personality and just a knowing that she had. And when I step back from that interview and I lean into this conversation, I also consider this in any other areas of belief system. There are people who come on to a platform and they just say it as if they just had it downloaded to them and know it to be true. And I go back to that mirror for myself, where there are things that I know to be true in my everyday life. There are things that I am in tune to and I have an absolute affinity to, but I have not clear answers. But I'm always interested when people speak with so much affirmative that they know how they get there. So here's some questions that I want you all to consider. What is the difference between structured religion and personal spiritual connection? In what ways have institutions shaped our access to spiritual experiences? Can something serve as both a guide and a limit? And how do we define power in the context of faith or spirituality? What is power? Because one of the things that I lean into is that quote again of, if your practices work, why didn't it help when someone was dying? Can we say that in all the different spaces? Yeah. Why didn't it help when there were people suffering from another people's lack of security in themselves, lack of love for themselves? Where was it? Why doesn't faith work in that manner? This is why the spiritual and faith conversations are so interesting to me, and it's a very sensitive space, because you can actually exist and have a personal relationship with God and then have these questions and try to understand, like, oh, why is the world the way that it is? So let's take a look at this next quote.
You've been taught that African spirituality is dangerous, it's barbaric, it's demonic, and that's why you fear your own power, even when it's shown right in front of your face.
So I've always considered that we've been taught something, and that somewhere along the line there were lies. And now we have to sit there and sift what was been told as a lie and what is truth. The closest thing that I can do is actually operate in what feels right, which can be weary, right? If it just feels right, it could feel right. Like, it feels good for me to eat some food that's not good for me. It feels good to, maybe get upset and mad and tap into my anger. Is that wrong? The interpretations of like being docile and the faith and religion also interpreted one way. But I've learned that there's wisdom in how we operate. And when you start to operate in wisdom, you can see the difference between, in this realm, this is the answer. In this room, this is the answer. So for instance, I think about a soft answer turning away wrath. If I use that, I apply that wisdom, is it helpful for me in any case? Yes. Is it helpful for me in all cases? No. I've actually one time went to a basketball game for my son, and for some reason there was a whole fight. There was a fight in the middle of the court. And I'm thinking I could just go out and I could be like, hey, y'all, we just gotta stop. Like, I wanted to give a speech. Like, you can't do that. I wanted to have some type of soft answer, thinking like everybody just gotta come together. But it doesn't work in that way. So wisdom also will tell me to stay away from crowds like that. And who is helping you through the wisdom? Some will say their ancestors, some will say with the Holy Spirit, some will say something else. Where does that actually come from? How do you know that's working, and how you know it's activated? People have answers for these in places. I don't say that these answers are wrong or right, but explore it. Is it your own mind telling you this, or do you really see the fruit applied when you actually operate in whatever truth it is that you operate in? When you tell your truth and you make fun of people on both sides, or you demonize people on both sides, in my opinion, the way that my framework is set up is, I don't find it credible. Your truth should be truth without having to harm people. But I also see Jesus calling people names in the Bible. This one time actually stands out to me. I don't know if it's often, but you also see people being called a fool. I'm like, I'm too sensitive. Don't call me no fool. Just tell me what it is that you want to communicate without having to call me a name. I just think that's okay. What's wrong with that? Why are you so, especially when we mad at people who didn't really affect us? Whoever it was that impacted our belief system or shaped our belief system, whether they are to serve us or not, is who we might have a problem with. But what happens is we associate anybody who identifies as that religion or that faith as the problem. We don't give space for it to be an exploratory measure, like to learn, like, what is it that I am misinterpreting? What type of fears am I leaning onto your belief system because I don't understand yours? And what do I learn about my own belief system that makes me feel even stronger in that faith without having to tear you down? Those are interesting spots to be in. Let's look at this last quote.
If as a Black person, when you watch that movie, you were not inspired to look into your history, to look back into yourself and find your roots, I don't know what to tell you, because you cannot be saved anymore. You are the weakest link.
I think I've already kind of shared my thought process on our delivery of our messaging. So I'm going to go ahead straight to the questions I want us to consider. And that is, what does it mean to be spiritually connected in one's history? How do people define salvation across different belief systems? What causes someone to feel disconnected from their spiritual roots? And can belief systems help people feel both grounded in the past and hopeful for the future? So if anyone takes away a question from this video, you can explore it in your own content. If you have the answer to some of these or a perspective to share, I would love for you to, comment below and maybe even stitch it through a YouTube if you can, to share, like, what is your answer to these questions? And they really go beyond this particular case. This is just the type of content that actually inspires more conversation for us to just sit around the table and connect, talk, and hopefully, make a meal together instead of having to turn it over because of the way that we were responding to one another. So I next want to go to a video. I have not really seen the video in full, so this will be a blind reaction. It just happened to come into my newsfeed. I was going to save it, but I saw the title and it was talking about white people. And I thought, for some reason, I feel like this is going to connect. I don't know yet, y'all. I don't know if it's going to connect yet, but I'm going to play it and I'm going to see what pulls out of this experience of watching this blind before I close out today's experience. This is coming from a creator named Kali Brewer. And what stood out to me is I just saw white supremacists are reporting my vids. If you see this is why white people deny their existence of racism. Now, I thought this was fitting. And I thought it would be okay to do a cold reaction to it just because the Sinners movie did speak to, the KKK and the understanding of like whites having power over another group of people. And so leaning into this Sinners review, I think I want to watch this and see if I can make any connections. So let's do this together.
The top 5 reasons white people deny that racism exists. This video keeps getting taken down, so if certain words are censored, that's why. Number 1, reparations. A lot of white people are terrified that they are going to have to give up a lot of their wealth. Reparations movements are gaining traction across the country right now, and white people are terrified that if they recognize racism exists and it's real, they're going to have to give that up, and they don't want that. Number 2, the Great Replacement Theory. If white people are openly racist, they could be risking pushing their white children away from them. This theory is that over time, there are going to be as many white people, so we won't be able to maintain our majority status, which is threatening to these people. Number 3, a lack of college education. Genuinely, I think some people do not realize how systemically racist our country is. Like, genuinely. Number 4, white people don't want to give up their congressional seats or their CEO seats, which is why they are anti-DEI. And number 5, if they acknowledge the existence of white privilege and nepotism, that means that they'll have to recognize their wealth wasn't acquired through merit, but rather family connections. That means they didn't actually earn it, it was given to them.
Are there any questions that you can think of as it relates to this video content being shared here? Okay, so let's actually make this a game. I'm going to put a pause on the screen right now because I'm actually going to pause and think about questions and see how it relates to the overall Sinners movie or from Nusilla's reflection of the Sinners movie or just the idea about belief systems and pull it into a response to this video. So I'll put pause on the screen as long as you want to sit there for just a few seconds, but we're going to come back and I'm encouraging you, maybe you can do this and maybe put something in the comments to say what questions come from your video. The goal here is for us to form questions that's not biased to one or the other or form a question that offers curiosity. Like maybe there's just something that we don't understand. Here's an example. I know a lot of people get upset when someone touches their hair and they're not from their same skin color. And it might be that we don't understand why they're so interested, or it could be that they're being malicious and they just want to touch our hair to make us feel less than. But maybe it's just the opportunity to learn which one of our truths are absolute by seeking the source. Sometimes when we seek source from the human form, they might just make something up. That's fair. But what if we try to practice, like, why do you do that? What is your interest? I only want to do this because when I was growing up, there were questions that I did have about people outside of me because it was odd and it was weird. And I would love the space and opportunity to not make up my own assumptions and to assume what it is or make fun of what it is, but just have an inquiry. Like, hey, why do y'all do that way? Or why does that smell like that? Right? Maybe it's the wrong way. Maybe it's something that you don't consider. But over here, I'm just practicing and considering just a different way to have connection and communication. So pause. Let's think of 3 questions that comes from this whole experience to close us out. And then we'll be done for the day. Okay, I'm back. I actually have 4 questions that I want you all to consider or actually consider for myself. This is my self-awareness journey. But if you want to invite yourself to it, these are some questions. Now, this first question actually is stemmed partially from everything that I discussed in this video and a conversation that I had with my son in the car going to school one day. And this was about politics and how in politics, we have Republicans and Democrats. And on the Republican side, they have these core belief systems. On the Democrat side, they have these core belief systems. But what happens is, because one side just looks wrong, everything that they do or say is wrong, even if there's some truth and validity in some aspect. So maybe one aspect is like, we're supposed to, like, care for one another. And they're like, no, we don't care for you because you're on that side. That's what it feels like. So this is what my first question is when something you believe turns out to be incomplete, where do you begin? And so I'm thinking about all of the ideas about, who believes in these things when it comes to white supremacy, who believes in these mindsets, like, where did it come from? And do you ever sit there and pause? Because as we see here, this is a creator who doesn't have brown skin sharing this message. And so that means that at one point in time, she had to think about what it means to sit in this skin and see that some things are incomplete, and then maybe review it with other people. And there are people who probably share the same skin as her who have problems, like actually mentioned in this comment, is that they have problems. So that's my first one. My next one is, how does fear protect people? Because when I heard all of the different options that she shared here about what's going on and trying to keep your place, it sounds like fear. And how does fear actually protect you? Because going back to the movie, it felt like you had to live in fear, and that was also protecting you. And we also had to protect ourselves because we were afraid of something. I have a theory that maybe that's happening in all different places. It just looks different. It looks different. Some get a little bit more harm than others, but it seems like the root is fear. So going back to this idea of establishing a new belief system or a way of thinking, how do you actually root in the foundation of love? How do you actually navigate through that principle versus the fear principle? Do we think there's better outcomes in using that? Those aren't my questions. Those were just like questions to my original question. So here's my third one. Can you believe in something once you see its flaws? Think about the person who is, let's put that sick person back on the screen. Think about this sick person. They grew up in faith, in religion, and Christianity. They grew up with whatever ideology and doctrine within their organization. And then they get exposed to something new. And they see flaws. Do we reject those flaws because of our core belief system and just ignore them? Or do we sit with them and try to figure out what is it that we don't understand about it? Maybe we still want to hold tight to our belief system. Maybe our belief system is working for us. We've had that spiritual relationship. We had that spiritual experience, that defining moment, and we're not going to move that from our faith. But is it okay to go back to the source of your faith and belief system and say, why is it this way? On both sides. When I say both sides, I'm still looking at this black and white view because I'm still learning, but I'm thinking those who believe in Christianity and those who are against it or share any other type of belief system, especially, African spirituality or Pan-Africanism or other tools in order to navigate Earth. This next one is, how do your belief system get passed down without questions? Or in general, how do we think belief systems get passed down? When I think about people who are vanilla, covered in vanilla or some sort of vanilla, people outside of the world that I grew up in, I wonder about those who have racist thoughts or hate with so much heart. And I wonder, how did you get that way? What happened? Because they were all once children who were taught, who was the person that taught them that? And there are books, there are systems that they said put in place, all built on fear and power and control. And even with this understanding, it makes me think about the animal kingdom, because I've been doing a lot of research on the animal kingdom. I've been thinking about, do they love each other? Are there animals in the animal kingdom that care for each other? And it's all been about survival, trying to survive, the idea of survival of the fittest. And it's just the interesting way of living. What if there was another way we just weren't tapping into? And we've tried our best trying to create religious systems and trying to create these systems to keep order. But somehow it all gets messed up. Like there's something that's tainted. And so sometimes it feels like you got to get rid of those who just are intentionally tainting the system. But you also have to identify which of those people that's tainting the system are doing it like from a root. Like they just hate tainting the system. And those who were influenced by their upbringing or the history of their upbringing or the history of the systems. As I think about living today and I think about how difficult it is and just my life to undo a habit and a mindset shift, I also consider like a whole people trying to shift this mindset. Like there's a whole people, when we look at this young lady's video, of people that think this way because of how their parents thought and their grandparents thought. So it's being passed down. It seems like it's getting better. But like if they have this coming from the root of who they are, like how easy is it for them to shift their habits and to see something new? Think about your own life. Are there any habits that you want to overcome? Like maybe it is weight loss. Maybe it is, you have a substance that you don't want to use. Maybe it is, trying to read more, whatever it is. You look at your own life and you mirror and you're like, this is difficult for me to get through. What type of resources, what type of systems will help me? If we're living in a world and environment where the systems are against us as well, it takes even more work. It doesn't mean that we are not able to do this work, but it's just something to consider. That everybody is trying to work through this with limited resources, but we still live in this environment where there's so many people that are intelligent. How do we use that intelligence? How do we use that freedom to think on the good, to consider other people, to be the best version of who we say that we want to be? But that's all, y'all. I had fun with this one. I hope that you all understood it. I am practicing on making sure I communicate better. So for any of you who stayed this far, I would appreciate if you click on the like button, subscribe, and to see me get better at trying to communicate the things that I find interesting. Until next time, hold on to you as much as you can. Hold on to your health, your well-being, and your mind. Be mindful. Bye.
Breathe.